We do this program to talk about what is right and what is wrong in the world. And one of the things that is wrong in our world here in the United States is happening in North Dakota. They're trying to build a pipeline there from North Dakota to Illinois, and people, most notably Native Americans, tribes there in North Dakota, protesting what the fact that it's being built, and it's being built first of all that it's being built. Secondly, that it's being built next to their water supply, thereby endangering it. So these protesters, it's a nice thing to call people water protectors. All protesters should be called water protectors, but they're literally protecting their water. And last night, in I would say one of the climaxes of this entire interaction, the police have come down very hard. They came down very hard last night with water cannons, with rubber bullets, tear gas, and pepper spray. And let's look at the intensifying police presence in North Dakota.
This is a medic.
So basically we have water cannons that are aimed towards our water protectors. So we're having severe cases of hypothermia. They are aiming for people's hands. I took one patient that had the skin shot off of his finger, so he was down to the bone. They're also aiming for the heads. There was another brother that got shot in the head and was losing consciousness. So it's pretty deliberate and it's pretty violent. Woman got shot in the head too, said this gentleman.
Shot in the head by rubber bullets, and that was August White, who I guess we are having when we don't have a crew there. We've had crews there at the Young Turks, and when we're not there, he does the he's taping stuff for us. Yeah. And that was, in case you didn't catch that at the beginning, that was a medic who had treated some of the injuries.
Unaware of this has been most of the national news media, I think maybe until last night, and because I started seeing it covered in places and with the regularity in places that it hadn't been covered, and I think that has to do with the election and the prioritization of something like this. This is a real story, and this is an us versus them story that's happening. And I think, Jimmy, do you followed this story and you've been vocal about it for quite a while, longer than most people in the media, but do you think that it has reached now a point where something like last night had to happen, unfortunately, to start getting the attention of people in the media?
I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more attention. Honestly, I hope this gets it. This is always what gets it more attention. But I'm really not heartened by it. Of course, there's going to be more violence because these people aren't going away and they're going to build that pipeline, and so they're going up against the most powerful interests in the world, right? And now they have the power of armed government behind them.
President Obama previously had said that they were looking at either rerouting the pipeline, doing different infrastructure to change the pipeline. Empowered perhaps by the election or not, there are the people that are in charge of this, who own this pipeline, who are building this pipeline, have said, no, this is going to go on as planned. A, is that true? Do we know if that's true? And B, do we know if President Obama has gotten involved? I mean, a lot of people who've criticized the president criticize him for not talking about this, not making an issue out of this. If he were, in fact, behind the scenes working to reroute it and do the kind of diplomacy that he's been given to doing rather than standing up and speaking about it on occasion, is that possible? Do you know anything about that? Is that in the works still?
No, I mean, I haven't heard anything about it. Jordan Sheridan has been up there, and I've talked to everybody who's involved in this, from Jordan to Wes to...
Jordan and Wes, Jordan Sheridan, our correspondent, Wes Clark.
Yes, and they're going, and Wes is going to be going up there with a group of veterans soon. So I wish that would happen sooner. No, I haven't heard anything about it. This feels very reminiscent to me of Occupy Wall Street when Barack Obama just let it happen. And it also feels reminiscent of the Wisconsin when they took the teachers union away from them.
Took the bargaining rights of the teachers.
Yes, so it makes it feels the same to me. He's very silent on it. He said before, when he talked about it before, he seemed very, I said he was sleepy. He was very soft-spoken, and he said he was going to let it play out for a few weeks after he gave false equivalency that both sides have to remain nonviolent. So it's a very I don't even want to talk about this story. Like when I saw this was on, it hurts me. I don't want to, because I just know how this is going to end up. and it's ending up that way right now.
But here's the thing. I mean, all these hard stories are so hard to talk about. Like, Charles Pierce, who writes for Esquire,
Yes.
who we've all seen what he said today. He tweeted, "According to footage, there are law enforcement atrocities going on at Standing Rock. Yo, news directors, it's the Pettus Bridge out there," an allusion to the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. So nobody wanted to talk about what was going on in the South. But when it got to the bridge and it got ugly, that changed things.
Yeah, and I Occupy Wall Street's an interesting comparison, but it just felt when you're firing rubber bullets and using
Water cannon.
a water cannon, I mean, that just feels like Bull Connor, and that feels like civil rights movement more to me, and that's galvanizing because I hope, because it just is an obvious moment where the situation isn't fair, and when the response does, and we need cameras there. That's the thing, and you need coverage. I mean, we all bemoan the quality of cable news journalism, and we should. It's not totally worthless yet. And so regular coverage of it, I imagine, would make a difference. I think
it made a difference on the Pettus Bridge. I mean, that's when people up
Bridge.
north started paying attention. People in other countries started paying attention when they actually had the footage. And at that time, it was photographs and newsreels. But coming over to America, and it was news.
That was a bigger movement.
Yeah,
and that was a movement it wasn't as easy to dismiss as. First, I mean, a lot of things that worked against the protesters here.
Yeah.
One, the biggest election of our lifetime and far of coverage, interest, and its mere placement. The American South was a place people go. Nobody goes where this place is. Remote, there's no big market nearby. So all of that worked against it. Now the election's over, but obviously everything this guy does is news. I mean, his wife and kid aren't going to move into the White House, although imagine if Bill Clinton weren't moving into the White House, it would literally be the lead story. And here we're but it's all pointless, and it's all. But we're focused on other things, and not this. There is obviously in this window of a holiday season and the inevitability of Trump's election by the Electoral College and swearing in, which is still 2 months away. If it's going to get coverage. Here we go. It would have to be now. But these are literally the most powerless people in the country.
Unquestionably.
As should be said, fighting arguably the most powerful people in the country.
Right. And not to compare it to the civil rights movement, but the bridge was a flashpoint for it. So if it's going to get attention, now it's getting it, and now it should get attention, and it wasn't getting attention before. Ben mentioned the rubber bullets. Here's a man who was actually hit in the head in North Dakota by a rubber bullet.
They got him covered. He's got a head wound.
Got a head wound. Let's go. Okay. Who's here? Great. We got water?
Yeah, but we only have one.
I'm going to sit. Is your truck up here? Oh, yeah. The white Tahoe. All right, I'll get it, bro.
He also needs a blanket. Who has a blanket?
There's a blanket right behind him.
Honestly, when someone came and put a blanket on me earlier, it just pushed the fucking water under my skin and made it colder. Does
anyone have a flashlight?
I took my jacket off. I had more layers.
Two guys hitting the crowd.
Yeah, hold on, stop. Passenger seat, is it open?
There's someone in there that hasn't.
This man was shot directly in the head
That's what we're
with a rubber
doing.
bullet.
All right, I know it's gonna be hard.
Could have
Lean
killed
your head
him.
back,
He's
watch
lucky
it.
to be alive.
Lean to the side. Yep, I know. Even if you do that, let's roll.
Prayers, man, prayers.
You're a hero.
Additionally, really, really cold, and the temperatures in the low 20s.
Yeah, and you're spraying water on them.
Yeah.
And as the medic said, there's hypothermia cases. It's not hard to imagine that when it's 20 degrees outside and you get sprayed water, there's going to be some hypothermia. It's not like you can run to the hotel. The nearest hotel is, I heard, 30 miles away. So what we need to change, if this is a Pettus Bridge type situation, we need, the citizen journalism has been great. What mainstream journalism can provide is mainstream acceptance. And someone who theoretically could then challenge, what the citizen journalists can't do is go to whoever ordered the firing of the water cannons or the rubber bullets and say, why'd you fire the water cannons and the rubber bullets? Theoretically, CNN, MSNBC, CBL, the New York Times, those places can. So they need to do it. And that will change, I hope, would change the nature of the story.
What do you think their reluctance is?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it seemed like it seemed like a marginal story to a lot of people for a long time. It seems like less of a marginal story. Part of it is our ability to focus. Like when the election's going on, it's literally a resource. They're not going to take someone off covering the election and send them out there. I would say that's a mistake and something that probably would not have happened in 1965 or before the 1964 election, but happens now. Whatever the reasons before, it happened. I don't think they're conspiratorial. I think they have to believe that this is a relevant story to Americans. But at some point, your job is both to report on the news and to alert people to what the news is, too. It's not just, well, Americans aren't interested in this. At some point, you say as a journalist, Americans aren't interested in this, but they ought to be interested in this, and then you go cover it.
And this is a story that people, generally the news would move on from pretty quickly once it was over. And that's part of the problem with these pipelines, it turns out, is that they just go from moment to moment and they keep getting built and they cover them for a minute and now the story's old. I mean, because everybody was talking about the pipeline for a while before the election. So Ben is 100% right. I mean, it's the ability of people watching to focus and the people deciding what's interesting news, putting it on the air. It has been interesting news. It's now more interesting, A, because of what it's up against, and a lot of people don't want to watch the new president-elect either. So they're hungering for another news story, and I think that's part of it.
Weren't we waiting? Wasn't the Army Corps of Engineers going to look to what inexplicably didn't happen in the first place?
Yes.
The Army Corps of Engineers was going to look to see whether there was a threat to the Standing Rock Sioux water.
Yes.
An environmental impact thing. They're still
so
holding off on their final decision,
Right,
apparently.
And they're waiting to have talks with them as well.
Right,
the Corps and the
But as the
Standing Rock.
company goes forward, right, and to see whether and also to see whether the burial ground was disrupted, to see whether it would. But and then Obama saying, hey, maybe we should take these things into account in the first place. Yes, you should take them into account in the first place, but okay, you're taking them into account now. So since that's happening, in a sane world, the company would just wait. And they would call everybody home and they would cover their stuff with a tarp or whatever it is you do when you're building a pipeline, and you would wait for word. But when you might have to move your stuff in another direction, since there doesn't seem to be, unlike what Bernie Sanders has to say, and we'll get to that momentarily, which is don't build the pipeline at all. I mean, for the Standing Rock issue, the issue is they just want it moved. I mean, I'm sure most of them would like it not built at all. But first and foremost nobody seems to be talking now about not building it at all.
This is an eminent domain issue at its core, and the people that are being eminent domained here are the Standing Rock Sioux, and not to mention other tribes up there as well that stake a claim to that area.
Amnesty International sent people there last month, and to make sure that to see whether there were human rights abuses by law enforcement. Again, that shouldn't happen here. And I believed for a long time that sort of thing wouldn't happen here, that we wouldn't have to worry about it. But the police, because of the remote nature of it and because of the lack of cameras, unquestionably are emboldened because there's nobody checking them.
So what do you
And I'm sure the company said, we don't have to imagine, hey, clear these guys out, God damn it, and get this done so when the Corps of Engineers comes through, I don't want to wait 10 minutes before we start going. I don't want to wait 5 minutes. We get that report, we are drilling, we're constructing. And to construct, obviously, we can't kill people while that'll be a problem. Yeah. That'll cost us this. So clear those people out. And because there's no significant media presence there, because it's all people like August White, and God bless him, the company, I'm sure, felt emboldened and empowered to behave in this way. And my hunch is they're patting themselves on the back. Literally, I'm sure somewhere there was a conversation where they're like, hey, we didn't use real bullets. We used water. Water and rubber bullets. What are they complaining about? You want us to get tough? You just look what will happen when we get tough.
They're protecting the water. We're using it.
That's right.
So there was a story, a few weeks ago or a week and a half ago about two police officers who had quit. Or there was reports that they had said that they were going to turn in their badge because they didn't approve of the violence being used on those. And people were like, look, isn't that good? And I said, no, this is actually bad because now those two good guys aren't there anymore and they're going to be replaced by two bad guys.
Right.
And so when you saw everybody was happy about that story, and I was like, that's actually a bad story because now we just have, maniacs out there. And look what they're doing.
Unless that story gets covered in the way you hope it would get covered, then it becomes a big deal. Then those guys can become spokesmen and people on the air, and it makes a difference. But you're right, if you just walked away, not in any way the same thing. But my grandfather, when he used to write movies, and he didn't like to do, he would just refuse to do something, and on principle. Right, he wouldn't write a scene for a movie called The Spanish Main. There's a big ship sinking at the end, and they were like, it costs too much money. Just write a scene where they talk about the ship sinking. Right, that'll be cheaper. Right? And he was like, no, outrageous. And they were like, all right, you do it. It's not like you don't win by just walking away.